What makes a man like Einstein? What makes a man like Tesla? What makes a man like Higgs? What makes a man like Mozart? What makes a man like Beethoven? What makes a man like Elon Musk? What makes a man like Steve Jobs? These men are largely admired for their geniuses and their unique ability of thought. Their quotes are printed on t-shirts, and their name lives in our memory. They are the true rock stars of our time, creating a real change from within. These men were, and some still are, shifting our understanding of the world, as well as changing the world around us. Some created ideas that shaped science, and others took science innovations and put them together in a unique package for the masses, and as in the case of Musk, are planning for a future that has only been possible by science fiction writers. The innovation of men such as this comes from a unique set of abilities and a single-mindedness to achieve whatever they have in mind. A genius is often seen at his time as a madman. And I invite people to watch interviews of Elon Musk and see how his attitude is different to every other CEO that you have ever seen. How his drive is enough to get you start doing things. How the ideas he proposes seem almost ludicrous at times, yet are largely imaginative. How failure means nothing to a man as him, as if he thinks if he hasn't failed, it means that he hasn't tried, and if he does not try, he will not succeed. Geniuses are largely male in their gender. They have, and always will be, male. The brain may not indeed need a certain capacity to reach a genius. For example, Einstein's brain was only seen as average. The connections between the neurons may not need to be perfectly aligned for another genius such as him to be born. But this sort of drive exists mainly in men, and the size of the brain or the connections between the brain are not the ones that make the difference, so women here do not really have an excuse. Arguably, finding men such as this men who refuse to follow the status quo and the herd and boldly go where no man has gone before, is quite rare. Even rarer is the chance that such men will be successful in achieving anything. The lone wolf is rarely successful, but when he is, he will lead the way forward. Often people say that the boundaries between a genius and a madman are ever so thin, as thin as perhaps as the boundaries between success and failure, but the reality of the life of these men is, as expected, quite different to the end result of their celebrated existence. It is certain, for example, that if Tesla did not come to the United States of America, our entire modern civilization would not exist. It is also true that if Einstein did not have the time to work independently on his science questions while working in a post office, without having any university associations and affiliations at the time, the theory of relativity would have never come to form. It is also true that if Mozart did not write thousands of hours of music beforehand, tirelessly practicing and writing, well, we wouldn't have Mozart. But what geniuses and mad people have in common is that, like them, there is almost a delusional self-belief in their abilities. They would continue despite failure at all costs. Nothing is worth more than the answer to the question that they are asking. Nothing is worth more than simply achieving the task. Women, money, and the like, good as they are, were largely irrelevant when it came to the questions of the universe, achieving one's own goals, and furthering the understanding of humanity. So people like these people seem to ignore women for the most part and only focused on them. Genius is intelligence and drive. There are thousands of undiscovered, mentally instituted, and perhaps irrelevant geniuses that have existed and will exist after these people pass away. The eureka moments are largely based on luck, but the ability to find those eureka moments is not simply based on talent, but rather being in the right place at the right time, and trying for the 10,000th time the experiment that kept on failing. Therefore, genius is intelligence, drive, and largely perseverance. The neuroscience has tried to come up with explanations as to what it is that creates a genius. However, despite the saved brains, the donated brains, the stolen brains, the studies on humans and animals alike, their explanations always fall short. Weighing the brain, looking at the brain activity patterns, observing the genetic code does not really provide any answer as to the unique and rhythmical movements of those neurons firing in just the right place for those eureka moments. For example, no amount of Einstein cloning will ever form another Einstein. No amount of training will create another Mozart. The neurons seem to be connected in such a way, and the activations of those neurons, the experiences that lead to that unique person being him, occurred once and will never happen again. But despite the lack of evidence and the lack of scientific answers, the answers as to what creates a genius will most likely be found in science and not in religion and philosophy. So as far as we know at present, we don't have a clear understanding of what the answer might actually be. Despite this, the continuous pursuit of science will perhaps give us the answer that we seek eventually. One thing is clear. These men were lone wolves into their pursuits, and they were putting in long hours in order to achieve it. And they were looking for something that only made sense to them at the time. Inspiration often strikes people, but it only does when the pieces of absolutely every concept that is necessary to understand the question at hand and come up with a theory have been understood completely. Imagination is humanity's greatest strength, but in order for things to make sense, as they did for these people, they had to become experts around every surrounding area of the problem that they were tackling. They must have gone through the problem a million different ways until they came up with their version of a solution. And even when the genius comes up with an answer, their hypothesis and theory needs to stand the test of time. The genius of a single human being can exist in one area and not in every area of life. For example, the genius of Einstein came in physics and not in mathematics, and definitely not in biology, and it will be unwise to expect it to be found everywhere. Additionally, despite Einstein being a non-believer when it came to quantum mechanics, after all, Einstein was famously quoted for saying God doesn't play with dice, quantum mechanics still seems to stand to scientific scrutiny, so perhaps Einstein was wrong with regards to that. Nobody knows or cares about the numbers of useless and faulty theories Einstein came up with before the theory of relativity. Nobody cares about Tesla's obsession with current and how it could magically rejuvenate the body. Nobody cares about Mozart's uninspiring pieces that he worked on prior to his spark of genius. But these are the things that make a genius. The failures and the work and the sheer power of will to say, well, fuck, that didn't work. Let's try again and again and again and again. In actual fact, as far as we understand at present, geniuses are not people with massively high IQs. Some of them are, of course, very, very intelligent, measurable in terms of IQ, but the human brain is built for thought. We need to remember that. It will also be unwise to expect someone with a less than average IQ to be able to crack the problems of the universe. But as far as science can tell at present, IQ does not necessitate genius. Humans are built for thinking, and what one chooses to do with their thinking, as well as the experiences that will lead to the moments of eureka that we talked about, or the upbringing, the genetic makeup, and the social conditioning that might make such a person function and work as hard as these geniuses did, is of course attributed to chance alone. Many people look up to these people for inspiration, but I don't think these people cared enough to be inspired by other people at all. These people were focused on the question at hand, and on occasion they were in an arms race with another brilliant person of the time. And this led to them competing and working harder in order to come up with an answer faster than the other person. As in sports, so as in science, the drive of people increases according to the determination of the people around them. The competitive nature of the male spirit is what largely pushes these men to work harder. But the determination that they will reach the answers first, or that the answers only lie in their heads and not in everyone else's head, is a pure testament to the self-belief that existed within these men. Most of the geniuses lived solitary lives. Newton and Tesla are good examples of people that lived in solidarity and achieved wonderful things. Other people like Einstein and Jobs were married. It is often said that Einstein would go long walks in order to ignore his family and his wife. He has been shamed on occasion for not being a good husband. He married twice after all, and the second time was to his cousin. However, he was his own man, despite the fact that he was married, and he focused specifically on his work and his physics. There are quotes that make one understand of what Einstein really thought about the relationships between men and women, but it stands to show that even when these men are parts of society, they're still doing things their own way. Einstein lived life as he wanted to live it, and he pursued the things that he wanted to pursue. One man's genius is not another man's genius, and unlocking the mysteries of success that led to a genius like Newton, and repeating the same experiment in a body like Einstein's will not lead to the success that Einstein had. That explains why this concept of genius is one that is difficult to crack, but may not even be a concept at all that needs cracking. After all, I often meet people that strike me as a genius, and for all accounts, they're not so. Men and women alike solve life's problems in ingenious ways. The vacuum ponytail trick is an ingenious way of putting a girl's hair in a ponytail. I often met doctors who would outsmart young toddlers all the time in order to do all sorts of things with them in terms of procedures and putting needles in and getting blood, etc. Creating fire from friction between two pieces of rubbing wood is quite ingenious. Cheese from milk, also genius. Salted meats that keep longer is also a genius way of maintaining meat. All of these things that we understand instinctually almost now are ingenious way of solving problems. We don't know who the first pioneers are, but they must have definitely existed. The problems have now been transferred to the scientific arena, and as we're different as people, we will go about things in a different way to everyone else. All ways will not lead to a solution, especially to a novel problem, but the person who perseveres, keeps his focus on, tries and tries no matter how many times he fails, and has this unique eureka moment will eventually be seen as a genius. Genius might not be as rare as people might think, but in today's day and age, the focus must be first to the job at hand, and then to the life that lies beyond. And the focus must make a man both immensely happy and unhappy, almost in order to create an addictive behavior from that person, so that he has to keep his focus on, in this pursuit of thirst for knowledge that keeps him 100% focused on the task. This is in summary what I believe constitutes a genius. Thank you for listening.